From Scottie Pippen's fractured relationship with his heiress, to the king bullying Cartwright only cause he replaced his friend Charles Oakley. Here's the real reason why players hated Michael Jordan. I've got to start with the feud involving Scottie P, and that's one of the saddest stories to come out of the NBA. These two were the cornerstones of the greatest NBA dynasty of all time, and they ruled the league. But as good as they were on the court, there was a lot of ego off the court, even during their peak years. It started with Jordan, duh. MJ couldn't handle the fact that Madonna had chosen Pippen over him as her lover, and this love triangle got out of hand completely. Madonna would often send a car after games to pick Scottie up so that the two could spend the night together. While this was happening, Madonna gave an extremely controversial interview, saying that she didn't want to date Jordan because he couldn't satisfy her the way Pippen does. Damn, for someone who had the NBA world at his feet within a season of coming into the league, MJ couldn't believe that Madonna was saying all this. And that's when their relationship took a turn for the worst. From that point on, it was championship galore on the court, but a pure disaster off it. As you can expect, the two sides eventually delved into one when Jordan took shots at Pippen for delaying his surgery on purpose. Oh yeah, this really happened.
But Phil needed that side of him to come out at certain times.
Before one of their final championship-winning seasons, Pippen was dealing with a very serious injury, but decided to get the surgery done closer to the beginning of the season instead of getting it during the offseason. This didn't sit right with Jordan, who questioned Pippen's decision, blaming him for being selfish. In fact, he went on a big-time rant, saying that Pippen wasn't a team player and had been carried by him throughout his career. Obviously, this angered Scottie, who was advised by his doctors to wait. There was a lot of back and forth between the two, but Pippen stepped up after returning, taking his game to the next level and helping the Bulls win another championship. All's well that ends well, right? You couldn't be more wrong, because winning another ring would only fuel Jordan's ego, and it reached a fever pitch. This man doesn't know when to stop, huh? Jordan's been even more insufferable with Pippen after retiring, leading to Pippen finally losing it. Look, MJ's one of the two greatest players of all time. No one can doubt that, but even he can't get away with being so egoistic about his success that he disregards his team's contributions during their 6 championship runs in the 90s. Everyone's seen The Last Dance, right? It's the wonderful backstory to the Bulls wiping the floor with the NBA during the 90s. But you'd be surprised to know that not everyone looks back at the documentary with a lot of admiration. And that includes most of the roster that did the dirty work around Jordan. They felt the rest of the team's role during Chicago's golden years was heavily underestimated in that docuseries. And I don't disagree with them. Anytime anyone talks about that legendary team, they always praise the supporting staff, especially Pippen. He was the reason the Bulls were so consistently good, and without Scottie, MJ wouldn't have been as successful as he was. Most of his teammates, who he often liked to punch, came up with clutch performances and big-time contributions during the entire 90s decade, but Jordan's too selfish to admit it. Many believe that he got away with it because of his greatness. But that's not an excuse, especially not in this era. Looking back at all he's done, you can't help but marvel at it, but the manner in which he treated Pippen and that Bulls super team, minimizing their impact, is absurd. Thankfully, Scottie clapped back and went on a full rant in 2023. It was completely justified, but Pippen's final straw was MJ's son dating his wife, and that was when Scottie let it rip, standing up for his team, like the team player that he was. He went as far as saying that Jordan isn't the greatest of all time, and how he would have been trophyless if not for Pippen and the great team around him. Yeah, that's pushing it a little bit, but I can see his point. Again, I don't think anyone can blame MJ's teammates for hating him. The man was a menace, and not in a good way. Who can possibly forget the time he socked Steve Kerr, only because he disagreed with him? Yeah, you've got to be truly unhinged to hit someone, simply because they disagree with you. It's so freaking wrong and unacceptable, and somehow Mike's gotten away with it more than once. In fact, Kerr called it one of the best things that ever happened to me. That's just plain weird, Steve. During a scrimmage, Kerr took offense to something that Jordan had done, and MJ, in pure MJ fashion, had a raging fit, where he launched one right in Kerr's face. Do I need to remind y'all of the time Draymond Green was canceled by NBA Twitter because he threw a punch at Jordan Poole? Things got so bad that Kerr said the punch was to blame for the Warriors' underwhelming performances in 2022-23. And it wasn't too long ago when he was claiming that a punch changed his fortune for the better with the Bulls. As per Steve, it was a rite of passage, and that punch got MJ and Kerr closer, with Jordan respecting him for standing his ground.
And I was just trying to make the roster, and Michael Jordan gets the ball right in front of our bench. And I'm already scared to death. Like, God, I hope I don't get into this game. I'm not ready for this stuff.
To me, that's just a very sick form of Stockholm Syndrome, and I expect much better from Kerr, cause Jordan's always been like this. It wasn't the first time he'd punched a teammate in the face, cause he did something similar to Will Perdue. Yep, the Bulls' big man during the 90s, Perdue was one of the underrated pillars of that Chicago side, and even he wasn't safe from Jordan's wrath. Or should I call it rattiness? Illegal screens can be super annoying, no doubt, especially in training, but the Bulls coaches use them all the time, cause they got the best out of Jordan himself. One time, in a scrimmage, Perdue was leading the second unit, and they were destroying the first, led by MJ. It got really intense, and knowing Jordan's competitive side, you can guess what comes next, right? He warned Will to not run an illegal screen, but Perdue, sensing his opportunity, nailed himself to the spot, knocking MJ to the floor. Jordan immediately got up, popped one flush in the face, and training was done for the day. In a way, it wouldn't be wrong to say that Jordan's talent is the only reason people tolerated him, cause why else would you put up with someone so hostile? As far as opponents are concerned, it shouldn't be a shock that the majority of them hate MJ. I mean, the man was on a mission to win, win, and win. The problem with that approach is 29 other teams end up on the losing side. Jordan dominated the league throughout the 90s, and if not for his many retirements, there's a chance he could have won many more. So many players who could have won multiple championships in another era ended their careers without a ring, only cause MJ was too busy snatching them off their fingers. Look at Chuck, for instance. He's not necessarily an MJ hater and respects Jordan quite a bit, but if not for Mike's sheer dominance, he would have been an NBA champ. This much is still acceptable though. His attitude with his teammates still takes the cake for me, cause he was downright mean to them. After all, MJ's responsible for ruining Rodney McRae's career, and if you don't know who he is, I'll fill you in. McRae joined the Bulls in his prime, averaging over 16 points and over 8 rebounds, and that's very good numbers to come up with, especially in the 90s. He was hoping to add a ring to a decent career, and that's why Chicago picked him, but Jordan destroyed his self-belief in training. The coaches would put them on opposite teams in scrimmages, and Jordan would bully Rodney for no reason whatsoever, screaming in his face that he was a loser. By the end of the season, McRae won that elusive ring, but averaged less than 16 minutes per game, and played in what would be his final season in the NBA, only at 31. As bad as that sounds, that's still not the worst thing that Jordan ever did, cause MJ was an overgrown baby, throwing tantrums when he didn't get his way, like his infamous treatment of Bill Cartwright. Bill's only fault was that he replaced Charles Oakley, someone that MJ really liked, and he made sure that Cartwright would forever regret his decision to join Chicago. He'd often throw impossible to handle passes at Bill, forcing the narrative that he couldn't control the ball, which wasn't true. Jordan called him Medical Bill cause of his injury history, which is hilarious but also very disrespectful. So from the king bullying Cartwright only cause he replaced his friend Charles Oakley to his fractured relationship with Scottie Pippen. These were the real reasons why players hate Michael Jordan.